Okay, so I did it. I did it. The thing with the ballots and the voting. I did it. Fucking did it. And I feel just as disgusted with myself and demoralized as I did in 2016 when I voted for Hillary Clinton, and we all know how that turned out. So this video really isn't for anybody. It's, I guess, just for me, but if you care what I think, you can listen. I just kind of wanted to like filter my thoughts out, get them on record as to why somebody who considers themselves even to the left of Bernie would ultimately vote for somebody who is only marginally to the left of Donald Trump in a lot of ways. It really comes down to two things. One is strategic and the other one is a matter of interest. And I'll go with the matter of interest first. The way I see it, I lost the right to vote in my own personal interests when the primary ended. We had two progressive candidates, one clearly more than the other, but if you want to broaden the definition of it, there was Elizabeth Warren and there was Bernie Sanders. I obviously was on the side of Bernie Sanders. I've followed Bernie Sanders for a while, and I thought, go as far as you can on the negotiating scale, and eventually, the furthest out you can argue at the beginning of a negotiation, the closer you are going to be able to get to where you finally want to be. That's why, even personally, I've switched from being a Medicare for all person. Now I support basically the NHS style system that they have in the UK. I mean, the Medicare for all for me is now basically just a compromise position. I mean, I would take it. I would take basically. So when I say I lost the right to vote for my own interests, it basically like the economic stuff that I wanted to push for, like universal education, universal childcare. There's foreign policy, non-interventionism. I'm not an isolationist, but I am a non-interventionist. So, those arguments basically all dwindled once the primary was over, because we were left with two choices. One was, two choices in the sense, it's not like you couldn't vote for third party, and I'm not the kind of person that would tell somebody to vote one way or another. One of two people was going to be elected president of the United States, and it was either going to be Joe Biden or it was going to be Donald Trump. And since I no longer had a personal stake in the election, as far as my personal political goals, I had to look at it from another perspective, which was always in consideration, but when things start to dwindle, you start to have to look at things more, who would benefit and who wouldn't. And I would say largely under the Trump administration, there have been a lot of tension against the LGBT community. There's been a lot of attention against brown people of any stripe, black, Hispanic. Not having Trump as president anymore would revoke the okay for those things to happen in public, because that's one of the effects he had. I mean, Trump was largely an ineffective president when it comes to policies. I mean, the only major thing he passed was the tax cut, and that was in his first year. After that, most of the things that have been passed under a Trump administration have been bipartisan consensus. The Democrats voted to increase the military budget. They were the ones who signed the CARES Act that allowed, Steve Mnuchin to give $4.5 trillion to Wall Street. So, but the major thing that Trump has had an impact on, what has been culture, has been, letting a lot of the grime and mold that's just been festering under the surface to just kind of bubble up. And you have a lot of people who are okay with being publicly bigoted now just because, you know, our dear leader. So, you know, when it comes to the LGBT community, I mean, obviously, you know, Trump has attacked the trans community, and, you know, trans people have gotten a lot of shit over the last couple of years. I mean, and that shit has existed forever. So, I mean, you know, to say that, you know, trans people have gotten shit is kind of an understatement. But it's just gotten worse. The same thing with white on black violence, white supremacist terrorism, you know, things like that. And I do think that Biden would take something like that more seriously, and would, you know, him being president would ultimately revoke that consent that people think they have. The other reason that I voted for Joe Biden is because I've spent the entire primary and the entire general election saying that Biden is going to be a shit president, and I very much still believe that. But Biden not becoming president, there's no way to prove that, you know, and we allow another 4 years of Trump, which is just going to be devastating to, you know, the economy, to, you know, every different type of person. The only thing that Trump has been largely low key on is, like, he's had tension with other countries, but he's honestly the first president in modern history that hasn't started a war. You know, that's not to say that he hasn't been involved in grotesque conflicts. I mean, Trump made a deal with Saudi Arabia to arm them while they committed genocide in Yemen. So I'm not saying that he's innocent. I'm just saying that he hasn't started a hot war. You know, back to Biden, I think that he's going to be a shit president. I think he's going to be combative. I think he's largely going to continue the status quo when it comes to serving corporate interests. I think that he is going to do some reforms that people might make an argument that he's good about, but it's just going to be like the ACA, where it was just reform around the edges. It didn't do anything to dramatically change the system that existed. You know, even if he rebuilds Obamacare entirely, he wants to call it Biden care because, you know, there's some obvious insecurities. He said it's actually kind of funny because the next two presidents after Obama are basically just going to run their presidency as if they're just trying to one up Obama. And I think that's kind of funny, but so I don't think he's going to do enough, though. And the ultimate hopes that I have are twofold. We know what's going to happen with we know what's going to happen with Trump. Things are just going to get worse. I mean, they're already bad. They're just going to get worse. And the most likely scenario with Trump is that if COVID goes down, you know, he may get a popularity rebound, and that's not something that we want, because when COVID goes down, just by its very nature, like a lot of jobs are going to come back, because if COVID goes away because of, you know, us not doing enough and nature running its course, then, you know, there's going to be jobs that come back, and, you know, people are going to see that as like some kind of economic win, like, oh, Trump brought us back from the abyss. And no, it's just because he took the model of like, oh, let's just see how many people die and hope people get numb to it. And, you know, eventually the economy is going to rebound. I mean, people need food, people need commodities, but we know it's going to get worse, and the only potential outcome I see of a Trump administration is that things get worse, or things get superficially better to the point where people can make an argument that his ideology is one that could continue in the future. We already saw it, like COVID started to go down in a lot of places, and the unemployment rate went from like 20% to like 12%. And, you know, what were they doing? They were out bragging about it. Like, oh, people got their jobs back. And it's like, no, people were just told to come back People were just told to come back to work despite the risks because, we got to keep building up the capital system. I think Biden is not going to be that great of a president. I think he's going to manage things largely in the same way as it seems like he's going to, just neoliberalism, favoring, financial markets over labor, favoring private insurance over the health of the public, everything like that. But that's not really an argument. Like, a lot of people on the left that I know use that argument as a reason to not vote for Biden, and I think that's actually a reason to vote for Biden, because in 2024, if you want progressive change to happen, you have to be able to have an argument, and you're not going to be able to make an argument that Biden would have been terrible if Biden wasn't terrible, if he didn't have a chance to be terrible. You can't do it. So let that ideology die. Let it die with Biden. So just let him run his 4 years, let him do what he's going to do, because under a Biden presidency, two possible things are going to happen. Either one, he's going to surprise us and he's going to cave to the populist fervor that exists. Between Black Lives Matter, between the progressive movement, there are a lot of movements that are going to consolidate very soon after the election. And it's because we have a housing crisis impending. We have people who have been out of work for months without any economic relief at all. That stuff's not just gonna go away because Trump's gone. Either Biden's gonna cave to those movements, or he's gonna be publicly combative to them. And if he caves, that means we have some momentum. That means we have some real momentum to move things forward. And with how progressive our generation is, it's only a matter of time. Basically, we've just been running out the clock on the boomers. If I'm going to be completely honest, we've been running the clock on the boomers. But the other option is that Biden is combative, that he fights against everything. He goes in there with a cupboards are bare mentality, like some of his staff is indicating that they're going to, and he's going to fight against it. And you know what happens at that point? Another insurgent progressive comes in and says, look, we had Trump. Did you see what happened with Trump? Look, we had Biden. You see what happened with Biden? Nothing got better. So now it's time to knuckle up and do the right thing. That doesn't happen. Like, if Biden doesn't win, people are going to spend the next 4 years thinking that Biden would have been some FDR character. And he's just not. The final point to sum it up is just, there's no argument that anyone can really make. I can understand certain people who get a pass for not wanting to vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been credibly accused of sexual assault by multiple women. Anybody who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, you get a pass. And I know some people wouldn't agree. Because they'd say Trump was worse, but sexual assault is not a moral scale. I'm sorry. It's not. You do it once, you're a bad person. At least for me, I didn't have any other excuse. There's only a couple of ways that I see the future going, and if Biden ends up caving, it means we have a real movement. If Biden ends up being combative, we have the option to argue against him in 2024. And that's another argument of why the left should vote for Joe Biden, because they're saying like, oh, the Democrats keep moving right. They keep moving right. It's like, let them keep moving right, because you know what they're doing? They're dwindling the Republican Party away, and eventually the Democratic Party is going to be the conservative party, which gives you wholesale to come in. It gives you wholesale to come in and start a progressive party, because people won't have anywhere else to go. Eventually they'll move so far left that they'll shit out anybody center left or beyond on the other end. You cannot have a sustainable party with Bush era war criminals and socialists. You just can't. Eventually something's gonna break. If the Democratic Party takes over enough of the Republican Party, then eventually the Republicans are just going to be fringe radicals. They're going to be like, cave dwellers. They might have, it's basically just going to be like white nationalists and right-wing populists in there. And like, they don't really have that good of an argument for a lot of people, especially when you consider the fact that somebody like Bernie Sanders, had he won the primary, would have stolen a lot of support from Trump. It wouldn't have been people going in and just voting against Trump. People would have actually been voting for something, and you know, there would have been a considerable number of Trump supporters who would have voted for Bernie because he was offering a platform that would have bettered their lives. There's no good argument against it. I mean, again, if you're a victim of sexual assault, if you're somebody who was arrested for crack and got a 100 times worse sentence than somebody for cocaine, then I can understand you not wanting to vote for Joe Biden or sitting it out. But, you know, for somebody who's never been directly affected by those policies, then it's kind of just your job to fight. The ultimate point of all of this is, like, you know, regardless of how this election goes, or we're going to be out in the streets, you're really just asking yourself the question of, who do you want to fight against? Do you want to fight against Joe Biden, or do you want to fight against Donald Trump? Because we've already seen how Donald Trump gets, and he rips motherfuckers off the streets. Not saying Joe Biden wouldn't do the same thing, but he would not have the support of his party, or at least the vast majority of it. There is a good chunk of the party that would fight against him on it. So that's all I had to say. I know this has been kind of long. I hope people found something useful out of this. For me, it's just, you know, I'm trying to diffuse the disgust of having to vote for another disgusting neoliberal over my own personal objections to that disgusting ideology. But that's gonna be it for now. Thanks for listening if you've made it this far, and I'll see you next time. Bye.